person. Ask anyone who knows me. I'm mean and bitter and a failure at everything that I say I believe. I'm not a good person. Ask anyone who loves me. I never write, I never call, I never think about anyone.
And welcome to The Bookcase Behind Me, the only podcast giving you actual theology that is for the masses and not just for the masses. That's right, if you ever looked at your pastor's study or his bookcase that is behind him in his office and thought, man, that looks really intimidating, well, guess what? The show is for you. We are coming at you to give you everything you would need to know or everything you didn't know you needed to know about the Christian faith, and especially from a Lutheran perspective. My name is Pastor Warr, pastor of St. Patrick Lutheran Church in Chipley, Florida, and today's extremely special because I've got a guest on the show today. We're going to talk about a matter that is not just indifferent. We're actually going to dive into a topic that's maybe known, but it hasn't been really talked about on a deep level. So we're going to get a little bit heady on this episode, even though if you read the title, you kind of know what the topic is, but the topic is not as simple as you think it is. It's actually going to be a little bit more complex than what you're probably used to. But first, I need to introduce my guest. So we have a very special guest, Reverend Josiah Scheck. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself, explain who you are, what parish you serve, your social security number, anything that might be maybe good for the audience?
Yeah, sure. I'm Pastor Josiah Scheck, pastor at Christ Evangelical Lutheran Church in Richmond, Missouri. I'm also the first and so far only graduate of St. Ignatius Lutheran Seminary, though to our very great joy, that's about to change this year.
Oh, yes. So I have to ask this because you brought it up. I wasn't going to bring it up, but you just brought it up. So do you have your grilling materials whenever the new seminarians get to the end of their studies?
It's in progress.
And
yep.
Okay. So yeah. So by grilling materials, I mean, you kind of know, the grilling process that goes along with this. Every single former seminarian relishes in the idea of getting to be a part of the grilling. So like, that's kind of,
oh yes.
Yeah. I don't know, like, I think there should be a cage stage when it comes, how people talk about like cage stage Lutherans, like when they first get into, well, there should be like cage stage examination of candidates, right? So brand new seminarians, you need to they got to pump their brakes because they're really like, I'm going to grill them more than what I was grilled. Like that's been my experience at least. So, goodness. But anyway, so we're getting to a topic that is not so much indifferent, but I wanted to ask you first, before we even introduce the topic, how do you personally pronounce this word?
Adiaphora.
Good. So you pronounce it the way that it's meant to be pronounced. So speaking of, grilling seminary students, I always got confused because one of my seminary professors would never, ever pronounce this word the way that we're pronouncing it, Adiaphora. He would say Adiaphora. That's how he would say it. Yeah, I know that's strange. But then again, I was also in a Presbyterian seminary as well. Long story. Most people who listen to BCBM know that story. But anyway, so yeah, we're talking about Adiaphora, which is it's not an indifferent topic. Even though it in somewhat, it kind of means indifference. Can you explain what the purpose and meaning of this term Adiaphora is? Maybe people have heard the term Adiaphora and they associate it with some myths and stuff we'll get into. Just what's the clear, distinct meaning of the term Adiaphora?
Sure. Adiaphora literally translates to indifferent. It's a Greek word. It's not found in Scripture. It comes from the Greek philosophers. And it's a moral term. When they talk about adiaphora, it means things that don't matter morally. So theft is morally evil. It's a sin. Murder is morally evil. Worshipping the true God, the philosophers might argue about which God that is, but worshipping the true God, not an adiaphoran, that you must do. That's not morally indifferent. So adiaphora are things like whether you live or die is a classic one. What you eat, what clothes you wear. These things don't matter on a moral scale. They can come or go. And the question for the individual is, what's the right thing to do? And the adiaphora will just follow along with it.
Okay, I see. So it literally does mean indifference or indifferent matters, things that are, if we were to say a lot of people are used to, at least if they're familiar with this term, they're used to the idea of things that are neither commanded nor forbidden. Would that be a decent definition to work with?
Yes, and that is how it comes to us in the Lutheran symbols, specifically the Formula of Concord of 1577. That's how it's defined there, is adiaphora are things neither commanded nor forbidden.
Okay, so just really quick, because I'm doing this for the listeners, so let's back up. Well, what exactly is the Formula of Concord for anyone who is just tuning in?
The Formula of Concord is one of those confessional documents in our Lutheran Book of Concord. So as Lutherans, we do subscribe to it as being 100% in agreement with the teachings of Scripture. It specifically was a document that unified the Lutheran Church after Martin Luther's death. After his death, you had a fragmentation going on. Lutheran teachers falling into different camps over various confused teachings, little bit of Calvinist teaching getting mixed in, and they saw that the Lutheran Church was falling apart. And so the chief theologians of the Lutheran Church got together, primarily among them the familiar name Martin Chemnitz. They got together and they addressed every question that was dividing the Lutheran Church. And they said, let's talk this through and get an agreement on what Scripture says about these things. Can we all agree that Scripture teaches this, and this? And that became the basis for the fellowship, for reuniting the Lutheran Church at the time.
Excellent. And I like the way you explain that they got together and, let's agree this is what Scripture teaches, because as you alluded to, when we talk about Lutherans being confessional, or we're confessional Lutherans, we're saying that the Book of Concord exposits what the Scriptures teach. It's an accurate exposition of the Scriptures, and in that they're saying the same thing. What the Scriptures teach is what the Book of Concord teaches. So we're not like elevating the Formula of Concord above Scripture or something like that. Some people get that a little bit twisted, but be that as it may, that excellent stuff. So what does the Formula of Concord exactly teach about Adiaphora, and where exactly can we find it in the formula?
That would be Formula of Concord, Article 10. And again, it's a very contextual document because it's dealing with these divisions in the Lutheran Church of the time. So it's addressing a concrete instance. And what that instance was the Augsburg Interim. You had the Smalkaldic War, or the Smalkald War, which essentially was the Holy Roman Empire trying to squash the Lutheran Church in Germany by the sword. And they came along with the Augsburg Interim, which said, basically, these are our terms of surrender. If you will agree to come back under the Pope and practice the things that the Roman Catholic Church practices, we'll stop killing you.
They're great negotiators, aren't they?
Oh, yes, entirely. So Philip Melanchthon, plays with the idea that, well, maybe we can compromise on some of these adiaphora, on some of these indifferent practices, like the calendar, like the festivals, the vestments, which bishops we follow. As long as we're really careful to teach people correctly for the sake of saving lives, can we compromise on these indifferent things? And the formula of Concord is coming back and saying, no, you can't do that. And that's the thrust of the article. That when you compromise with the enemy of the gospel, even in adiaphora, you are giving the false appearance of unity, and thereby you are teaching the observers an incorrect confession, because they see the similarity between the Lutherans and the Roman Catholics. Moreover, they see that the Lutherans specifically changed to conform to the Roman Catholics. And therefore, the assumption drawn is, oh, I guess they're in agreement with the Pope. And so we can't do that.
So that's a completely different assumption that's going into that. I mean, with the historical context of it, than what someone may be bringing to an idea of adiaphora, because I think that there's a lot of myths out there about what this article does and what it teaches that it doesn't sound like, that's what we're describing here with the history. So, what are some of the things that this article does not teach that we might think of as, well, adiaphora is this thing or that thing, but that's not specifically what the article is dealing with. Have you run into any of that?
I have. And I'd say the biggest danger that we run across in Lutheran circles is we hear the definition of adiaphora. We hear that it's things neither commanded nor forbidden. And we leave it at that. Danger is that leads to the assumption that anything that is an adiaphora, that God has not specifically told us to do or told us not to do, we can handle however we want. It can come and go, and it's completely up to us what we want to do with it. And that's not the case at all. And that's usually how it gets applied.
That popular definition of, or at least that popular understanding of adiaphora, seems to be at odds with what Article 10 is actually saying. And I guess I could be wrong on that, but I mean, it seems like from the historical context and the reading of Article 10, the popular notion of adiaphora seems not to comport with that article. Or am I just completely off and, cuckoo bananas on that?
No, you're absolutely right. Because the adiaphora in question, let's take the calendar, for example. One of the things talked about in the interim was that the Lutherans would be required to recognize all festivals, saints' days in the church year, which we do. We do commemorate most, if not all, of the historical, traditional festival days of the church year. But it's a matter of context, because it was displaying conformity to the papist church, it was a problem. But in a different context, it might not have been. And so the warning is, yes, these things are adiaphora. They are absolutely indifferent. But it depends on how you use them. And you can't just do whatever you want. There's context here.
So, like, let me throw out an example for you. So we'll say early 20th century or late 19th century, early 20th century. Within American Lutheranism, you have a lot of you have a lot of people that are, like, for example, they're not big into vestments. We would be these days. We're big into vestments, but they're not into it because the cultural context of early 20th century America would put basically anyone who wears vestments is either a modernist, liberal, or they're papist. So when you have Lutherans on the frontier in America, they're choosing just to wear either a simple cassock with preaching bands or even just the Geneva gown. They're choosing to do that and a lot of them cite Article 10. Would that be a right understanding, like, as far as like a cultural context that they're saying, like, this is a confessional point? Like, yes, we could wear vestments. Like, I mean, George Gerberding talks about this, where he's like, yeah, we could wear vestments, but at the same time, America is not ready for vestments. Is that kind of where this is coming from in some sense? Are they applying it correctly in those contexts?
It's certainly a valid application. I think of even a more extreme example that some of us are familiar with, that early in the Reformation, Luther was really pushing for give the wine in communion to the laity, because the papist church had taken the wine away. They were distributing just the bread, right? FYI, distributing the bread and the wine isn't an adiaphoron because Jesus said to do it. But Luther pushes on that theologically and then backs up and says, but do it gently. Don't just thrust this on the laity. They're not ready for it. But this is where we need to go to be obedient to Christ. But we have to do it gently for them. So, yeah, I think that's a very valid application in the context that they were in. And I don't know the details of the American scene with the vestments and that as much as I should. But it's a valid point to be made. If it's you might say that this is a good thing to do, but if in the context it's going to cause more confusion or a little bit of distress, then take it slow. And it's an adiaphora. It's not that important.
Oh yeah, and the fact that you bring up Luther's hesitancy to even innovate in a way that we could say is not. I mean, giving the bread and the cup to the laity is not adiaphoron because Christ commands this in his institution. However, Luther is slow to enact this just so he doesn't bruise consciences. And it even gets into that letter that everybody misquotes. The one where he says sin boldly, and that's the only thing that anyone ever quotes from that. His whole point is, making sure someone is gentle, and if they happen to, mess up on something, sin boldly, but he wasn't saying just do whatever you want in that. Everyone just quotes that sin boldly line, and they don't have no idea what it means. So, like, this is actually what it means. It's to, if you're going to mess up and you're going to deliberately do it slowly, then you need to purposely do that slowly, even if it means that you're not really sure what to do at the moment. I mean, it's okay in terms of adiaphora, if that makes sense. Sorry, I had to go on that rant, but
no, that was fitting.
No, so with that, I mean, we're looking at a specific historical context with Article 10. What then is, how are we bringing this into like current, confessional Lutheranism? Because again, we have all these, and we'll get into some of the myths associated with this, but how do we apply this article in the formula to modern day? How should we think about this article without bringing our own kind of ideas of what it should mean?
Yeah. When I try to apply this principle of Adiaphora, I think of it in three different contexts. I think of it in what I call philosophical Adiaphora, which is sort of the original grand scheme idea that your life is indifferent as long as you do the right thing. That's philosophical. I also like to talk about ecclesiastical, which is a fancy word for churchly Adiaphora. That's what the formula is talking about. That's, do you use vestments? How does the liturgy go? What hymnal are you using? And then we also can talk about civil Adiaphora. That's the stuff that the laity and pastors deal with on a day-to-day basis in their normal earthly lives. That's, what clothes do I put on? That's, do I eat breakfast or not? That's, which movie do I go see? And this is very much, this civil Adiaphora concept is the hardest to deal with because we don't realize how many of the choices we make daily are indifferent morally and yet have dramatic consequences depending on the contexts.
Well, for example, if somebody's, a University of Florida fan or an FSU fan, I mean, obviously you're going to want to disassociate with the University of Florida people because FSU is where it's at, right? I mean, that's exactly how it goes, right? Which football team do you root for?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent example. Yeah. And so how do you deal with that? Yeah. And it's, and to play with that, it's okay to root for a team, but that doesn't mean that you can be jerks to your family members and your neighbors who root for the other team.
No, wait a minute. Hold on. Okay, so part of my family believes that a mixed marriage is someone from the University of Alabama marrying someone from Auburn. Okay, so this is like, football's a big thing, especially in the South. So, we need to get this straight. So you're telling me that I can't disassociate from my family just because they say War Eagle?
I think the fourth commandment kind of implies that. Yeah.
All right. So I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you, and you're doing great, and I keep interrupting you with these stupid things. But I mean, it's kind of like, okay, what football team ultimately? It's an indifferent matter. Like, I mean, we may not want to admit it. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but it really doesn't matter if you like a certain football team or if you watch Grey's Anatomy or something like that. Like, some of these things are indifferent matters, but they do actually mean something in their context. I mean, depending on how far someone wants to take it, I'm assuming.
Yes.
All right. So how does that break down then? So how do these understandings of Adiaphora actually help the Christian to navigate those part of their lives? Because if someone can say, well, if things are indifferent, then they're just indifferent, and this doesn't really help me much other than to say, I guess I can root for this particular football team or watch this TV show. That's kind of what a lot of people think it boils down to. But how does it really help us and affect us understanding this type of Adiaphora, or how we understand Adiaphora?
So you ask, how does it help navigate the question of Adiaphora in the daily life? And I'm gonna preface this by saying it actually makes it harder, but it's harder in an.
All right. we're checking out. We're done. We're not going to do this anymore. No, wait a minute. You're saying that it's a little bit harder than what it initially seems like? No, can't do that. No. I guess I'll hear you out though. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's harder, but it's harder because it's honest. And that's a lot of the time what we need to remember, that we shouldn't shy away from things because they're more difficult. We should always strive for something because it's true. And if you grasp what is true in the long run, that will help you practice using it right and doing the right thing because you understand what's actually going on. It's like ignorance is bliss. Like, sure, in the short-term sense, ignorance is bliss. But in the long term, hiding in your own little bubble all your life will put you in some pretty bad situations. That's kind of how it is with Adiaphora. It's like you're better off not knowing about it unless you're serious. And if you're serious, you're going to take it all the way and understand it, which not all of us are going to be able to understand it fully. That's the way it is with all doctrine. But all Christians are called to understand the doctrine of Scripture as much as they can.
Yeah, so we're going to be jumping around a little bit on this. So you basically just wiped out pretty much all of the myths associated with Adiaphora because it's become such a simplified and very I hate to say dumbed down, but it does seem that way, that, through popular parlance or conversation, we've dumbed this down to, well, Adiaphora just means I can do whatever I want. It's an indifferent matter. It's not commanded nor forbidden. All those things have maybe a morsel of truth to them, but it seems like you're saying that in the actual application of these things, it's actually going to matter a lot more, and it's kind of more of an advanced thing to think about because it's not just I can do whatever I want or it's just an indifferent matter. So you've kind of wiped out all the common myths at that point. So let's just go through. You talked about the different types of Adiaphora, and there's philosophical. You said ecclesiastical, civil. Let's go with the ecclesiastical. So, what exactly is ecclesiastical Adiaphora?
Ecclesiastical Adiaphora is the Adiaphora. By the way, if we haven't said this yet, Adiaphora is technically plural. And if you're talking about one indifferent thing, it's an adiaphron for the audience. Because I've used both, and I don't know if I've explained that.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing you explained that because, just like at the beginning, it's like, how do we pronounce this? And also because it's a Greek term, English is, a lot of people they'll use those interchangeably, but, that's a good thing to point out. So.
So ecclesiastical Adiaphora are the Adiaphora that are the responsibility of the clergy, the pastors, for the benefit of the whole church. That's how I explain it. Okay.
So does this go into, I'm assuming this goes into things like the liturgy, vestments, what hymns you're going to sing, who does it go into, like all the minutia of it, like who's going to clean the bathroom during the week, or is this just more of in terms of liturgy, like what exactly is entail here?
It's not a hard and fast division, and there are probably a good number of things that kind of blur the line. Just because it's not a solid definition. What it is trying to categorize Adiaphora for the sake of applying it more clearly. So specifically, this is where the formula of concord is. The formula of concord is not dealing with who do you hire to be the janitor. The formula of concord is dealing with what are you doing in the church service.
Gotcha. So this is where the it's a little harder to apply, because you'll have, I'm speaking as much from experience as I am anything else, that you'll have people, pastor's got to pick who's gonna do the janitorial work, and it's like, and then someone comes in and applies, no, that's left-handed kingdom, no, it's Adiaphora, no, it's this, no, it's that. So this is where what you're talking about, hard application come in, where it's not a hard and fast rule, but specifically the formula of concord is specifically talking about the church service. What are pastors to do when faced with, are you going to accept something that's an Adiaphora, even if it becomes a matter of confession? They're specifically talking about the church service, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Makes sense. It makes sense. I know people tend to generalize things, so that's kind of what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I'm generalizing things. So in the case of ecclesiastical, we'll take this from a layperson's perspective first. What would you say to a layperson that is having to deal with, say, let's do a hypothetical. Pastors trying to introduce good, meet right and salutary liturgical practices into the church, and some of the congregation is just not ready for that. How would you? What advice would you give for the laity that are very persistent, that the pastor just he's got to get this done really quick? You see this a lot, especially in other Lutheran synods of, the trads really want the pastor to get this thing going. Is Adiaphora applying to the situation, or is it not?
Adiaphora is applying to the situation, definitely. This sounds weird to say, but minute by minute in the divine service, most of what we do is Adiaphora. The things that Christ has commanded are the Lord's Prayer, the sacrament, the absolution, the teaching, which comes in various forms. Primarily the sermon, but most of the liturgy is a form of that teaching. But then how we do that can fall into Adiaphora as long as we do it. So, what advice do you give to the laity in that situation where the pastor is trying to do the best with the Adiaphora he has to deal with? Frankly, we just go to the table of duties. What do the laity owe their pastors? They owe him obedience for the sake of Christ. They owe him their support financially, as well as psychologically.
Yeah, sure.
So the Adiaphora, those are his responsibility, and it's not for the layman to tell the pastor how to do the service. Now, a pastor should receive feedback. They can and they should be honest with the pastor about their experiences, their impressions. It's like in a family dynamic. The father ultimately gets to make the decision, but it's also good if he listens to his wife and children as he's doing it. That's kind of how it is with the pastor and the congregation. It's his responsibility. So don't try to do his job, but do be honest with him so that he can do the best for you that he can.
Oh, you just made a whole bunch of people's heads explode all at once. Like, first I'm thinking the hardcore trads heads are going to explode, because it sounds like you're saying that, there's a lot of things in the liturgy that, that really do fall under Adiaphora, and yet we still do them. So, I've actually got to trust my pastor in this. So this is crazy. But you're also getting a lot of the left-leaning people's heads exploding, because, most of them think that fathers and pastors are just tyrants. So, like, they don't ever listen to anybody. So you're just exploding all sides of the spectrum here. You're blowing their minds with this. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you have read early American Lutherans like G.H. Gerberding, but Gerberding is like right on the line with this as far as what you're saying, because Gerberding is of the opinion, and it's a very interesting opinion he has, because he's very much in agreement with the liturgy. And he's even, Gerberding's coming up in a time where the common service, the English common service, is being, universally accepted by, pretty much the majority of American Lutheran bodies at the time he's writing. And yet there's still congregations that have not adopted it. They're still doing a lot of German services. He's very keen to say, look, I believe in this common service, and it needs to be universally applied to Lutherans in America especially. But we have to be very careful in doing this. Like, he does not want to alienate the congregation as he's doing this, as he's working towards this liturgical unity in America. So that seems to be, at least from my reading of it, it seems to be what you're talking about with the application there with ecclesiastical Adiaphora, where we could say, is the common service Adiaphora? I guess, sure. But at the same time, Gerberding kind of has this balance where this is what we confess. It's a unified service, but also the needs of the laity and how they interact. It seems like we're needing a lot of wisdom in this area rather than fast, hard, practical advice, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Like, Adiaphora is more wisdom than it is step 1, step 2, step 3.
Thank you. That's a very good way to put it. And if I may, I'm going to draw a connection all the way back to your introduction, where you said, we're talking about indifferent things, but this isn't an indifferent issue. Just because the thing in question is an adiaphoron doesn't mean that it's okay to do it multiple different ways. And this is where, again, the question becomes really hard, especially for ecclesiastical adiaphora, where the pastor has to make the right decisions for the entire congregation, and maybe even as it affects the church at large. He has to weigh his options, which are adiaphora, and has to choose which ones are the best for his flock. And that is a very hard question. And I would go so far as to say, well, actually not I say it, but Paul, as we can get to, if you choose a poor option that causes offense, when you could have chosen a better one, you sin. Even though it's an adiaphoron, you made a sinful choice. And that's why it's so hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it's heavy stuff. It is really heavy stuff. And because that is a heavy topic, obviously we got to bring in the scriptures on this. So what are some relevant passages when it comes to defining Adiaphora, especially if we're going to look at that, applying Adiaphora and applying things that are Adiaphora is more wisdom than step by step. What do the scriptures say when it comes to these matters?
So like we said, Adiaphora, the word, doesn't come from scripture, but the teaching and the concept does. And I'm going to read here from 1 Corinthians chapter 8, where Paul is saying, what do we do about meat sacrificed to idols? Can we eat this stuff? And he tells you, what is an idol? We know there's only one God, so all these idols are false. In other words, whether it's sacrificed to an idol or not, strictly speaking, is an adiaphron, because the idol is just a lump of wood or silver or whatever, and it doesn't matter. Whatever the person's intention was, it doesn't mean anything because it's just an idol. So for you, the Christian, that's an adiaphron in the strictest sense. Okay, but what does he then say at the end of chapter 8? But beware, lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge, shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died? But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, he concludes, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble.
But didn't the Apostle Paul, didn't he know that in the 21st century there was going to be a Christian freedom movement? And, did he not understand that Christian freedom, it sounds pretty harsh what he's saying compared to, because, let's face it, we Lutherans have had a long stint with a certain group called, pietists. And I think that the knee-jerk reaction against pietism oftentimes is Christian freedom without taking into consideration what the Apostle Paul's saying there. Because that's heavy stuff. I'm not even going to eat meat. You take this into modern day. If getting the Baconator from Wendy's is going to make, somebody who's struggling with, addiction to food or something in my parish, if it's going to make them stumble, then I'm not getting the Baconator. It seems like such a small thing in our modern day, I guess, because of Christian freedom. But that's really where it comes down to. It comes down to love of neighbor, that you wouldn't always exercise Christian freedom, as it were. Sometimes there has to be some, and I know a lot of people hate this word, but there's got to be some temperance there, in things like this. The Apostle Paul seems pretty harsh compared to what we get nowadays.
Right. And that's what Paul is also saying, that without love, freedom doesn't mean anything. Because we do have Christian freedom. And that's, if you will, the good news of understanding Adiaphora. It's coming to the understanding that, contrary to the pietists, it's wow, I can enjoy movies and I can enjoy alcohol. I have to be careful with them, obviously, but I am free to enjoy these things of the earth. But when you have freedom and you, out of love, choose not to use your freedom for the sake of your neighbor, that becomes a virtue. That becomes an act of love. If you were forced to do it, if you were forced, thou shalt never drink wine, because you never know when someone next to you is a struggling alcoholic. And then you can't drink wine even in the safety of your own home. That's tyranny. But if in your freedom you say, well, I thank God that I have the freedom to drink wine because I like it. But I have a friend over who thinks wine is sinful. And he's mistaken about that, but that's between him and God, not between him and me. So I'm going to choose not to use my freedom for his sake. That's not tyranny, that's love.
Amen. There's not much to add to that, but amen. That kind of goes into, I guess, I mean, obviously the popular thing to go to with Adiaphora is always the hazardous substances or your practices, right? You know, smoking, gambling, stuff like that. And what realm of Adiaphora do those fall in exactly?
Again, they can blur all the lines because it's just about applying it. But usually
Oh, it's that wisdom thing again. Oh, it's that wisdom thing. It keeps rearing its head with this topic. It's almost like we need an entire book of scripture that talks about wisdom. I'm not sure where that would fall in line with Proverbs. Anyway.
Oh, it's probably hiding in the Vatican somewhere. They stole it.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, they did. It's right next to, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus and those manuscripts and stuff.
If only we had them.
If only there was some sayings of wisdom. But anyway, yeah, so not a hard and fast rule, but if you could categorize these type of Adiaphoras, these are the type that most people go to when you're talking about Adiaphora, smoking, drinking, stuff like that.
Usually we'd think of these as civil Adiaphora because they're not the choice of the pastor trying to do the best thing. They're usually just your personal choice for your personal enjoyment. So we think of those as civil Adiaphora. It's just your choice. But obviously your choice is in context, as we'll get to.
Yeah, and it seems like those civil Adiaphoras tend to change based on context and culture as well, because at least in modern day America, where there's a heavy influence from not just pietism, but Baptist churches and different ones like that. You're probably not going to walk into a tavern, wearing your clerical collar and get a free drink, unless you live in Boston, of course. But at least in the South, that's not the case. So, do cultural mores or things like that fall into this discussion of Adiaphora?
Very much, because the easy example is, even if you see through the cultural trend as merely a cultural trend, you probably have neighbors who think that that's there for a reason. Okay, let's take smoking. It's kind of it's a simple one. You had the movement in America where everybody smoked. And then we started figuring out how bad it was for you. And now we've had the opposite movement of smoking is evil. Mm-hmm. And, well, the doctrine of Adiaphora is teaching us that it's neither. It's an Adiaphoron. It's not sinful by itself. It is dangerous. That's just the practical scientific truth. It's dangerous. But there's also now the recognition that I'm probably next to somebody who either thinks smoking is evil or maybe recognizes that it's not evil, but he still thinks it's gross, or it gives him some sort of asthma attack or messes with his breathing somehow, or any of those reasons are reasons to not smoke around this person. And when you've got a whole cultural trend in one direction, then you have to start being more careful, because the odds of someone being bothered by it increases whether or not you know it.
It's a really interesting take on this, because again, and I know I keep at least going back to, a lot of times the simple definition of Adiaphora can be just, I can do what I want to, it's an indifferent matter. But the more we kind of dive deep into this, the more it seems like it's definitely not an indifferent matter, because the love of neighbor affects how we go about this. It's an interesting, and I want to say this is where you were talking about, it's actually, the more you dive into this, the more you find out about it, it's actually harder. It makes things a little bit harder, because you're always, you should always, at least in Christian love, have that in the front of your mind of, what about my neighbor? And that's, that seems to make it harder. Is that kind of where the difficulty is? Like, the old Adam just does not want to give up the simple definition of things?
To put it simply, the old Adam wants to do absolutely everything wrong if it can. And so,
well, that's true. That's an understatement.
If it's complicated, the old Adam wants to simplify it. If it's simple, the old Adam wants to make it messier. So, yeah. So Adiaphora is a complex doctrine, and so the old Adam wants to be, look, just give it to me simple. It's, I can do what I want. On the other hand, Jesus takes bread and says, this is my body. That's pretty simple. And so, of course, the old Adam is like, well, metaphorically.
Yeah. Is really means is? Really? Is that what is that all it is? Yes, that is means is. That's all it is. But it does really, I don't know, it gives us this really interesting and, three-dimensional way of looking at, again, our relationship to neighbor, our actions in this world. How would you say that, in learning about this particular topic, how does it communicate law and gospel to the individual Christian?
It's a very humbling doctrine to study, precisely for those reasons just brought up. You think it's simple, and if you ever think you've mastered it, you are so wrong. And I've been guilty of that repeatedly. And it forces you to think about your neighbor, not yourself. If you're concerned about preserving my freedom, then you're looking in the wrong direction. This is about loving your neighbor. And you know what? No matter what you do, you sin. That's the nature of original sin, of the concupiscence that we still have even after baptism. Until Christ comes again or we die, everything we do, we will sin because we are sinful. But we have to make choices in what we do. And I'm not saying that every action that you make is wrong, but in everything you do, your own sin taints it. And so even when we make the right decisions, when we do the right things with Adiaphora, when we properly love our neighbor, we still have to go back to the cross and say, Lord, I am guilty of sinning in this. And maybe I don't even know exactly how, but I know that somehow I did not do it perfectly as you would have.
Exactly. Yeah. And hey, that really, it makes it difficult, like you were saying before, to apply this, but that's where the freedom really comes in, is to know that, we're not expected to do things perfectly, but we are expected to return to Christ in how we do these things, even if it seems like an indifferent matter. Ultimately, for the Christian, there's nothing really that's indifferent. It's all pointing back to what Christ has done for us, and now in turn, what are we, how are we showing Christ's love? Faith without works is dead. So, obviously the chief work is to love your neighbor. I mean, I could see this, what you're saying, applying even to, husband and wife arguments, who's right, who's wrong. Well, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. Both husband and wife have to understand their own sinfulness and their own dependency on Christ, so that it makes it easier to walk together in love. I don't know if that's stretching it when it comes to applying this topic, but you can give me some feedback on that.
No, I think that's very apt, because it's all a reminder that it's not about me, that it's about Christ, and it's about loving my neighbor for his sake.
Excellent. So we're actually getting close to time on this. Do you have any final remarks that you want to make, or something that you wanted to say but we haven't touched on it just yet?
Well, you wanted me to apply law and gospel here, and I kind of haven't gotten quite to the gospel, so I'm going to quick say something about that the doctrine of Adiaphora is only relevant because we are already justified by Christ. See, for the unbeliever, there's no such thing as Adiaphora, because they can't make a good decision. They are not redeemed in Christ, and therefore everything is automatically a sin. And it's only with the Christian that we even have the option and the freedom to try and do things right, to try and love our neighbor, even just to try and enjoy things in thankfulness to God. That is only a possibility because we're already redeemed and justified.
A lot of people are going to be upset at that, and not just unbelievers. There's going to be some ill-informed Christians that are not too happy with that last statement. You're saying unbelievers are incapable because, yeah, they're not in Christ. That's kind of, I believe Luther wrote a whole book on that, about, something about the will being bound or something like that, right?
Well, we just ignore that one or something.
Yeah, or something, right? Well, but it is something we got to remember, just like with a lot of these things. I mean, the whole reason this podcast exists is to try to make it less intimidating, try to make theology and our applying of that doctrine that we get from the scriptures and from the Book of Concord a little less intimidating. Does not mean it's going to be easy, but it's what we can at least, look to Christ in faith, and we can actually know what the scriptures and the confessions teach in a way that actually gives us joy. I'll give you the very last word. How about that?
All right. I'm sorry. Now I'm drawing a blank.
I thought you were going to say, like, the very last word is okay. And that's it. Like, that was going to be your last word.
I mean, you could just cut off the recording right there.
I could. Yeah. Yeah. So your very last word was okay. That's great. Well, it has been an absolute joy having you on here. And I know I could not have broken down this topic, by myself. Definitely could not have done it with the precision that you've done it, and especially with trying to apply wisdom to that, because let's just say I tend to be a little bit snarky. So I'm glad that you come on the show and that you gave us some great nuggets to chew on this topic that seems to go to the wayside in a lot of ways. So thank you for the wisdom, Pastor Scheck, and thank you for indulging this conversation about indifferent matters that are not truly indifferent.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for keeping it on track too, because I'm too much of a fan of rabbit holes.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I think most pastors are, which again, why this podcast exists. So, because there's not, I don't
join us down a rabbit hole.
I know, right? Maybe we do like an after dark show where it's like it just called Down the Rabbit Hole, and we just get a bunch of pastors just talking like random stuff, and it never goes anywhere, never has anything, you know, as it usually does.
Of course.
All right, so thank you again for being on, and until next week,
I'm not
everyone,
a good person.
God bless.
Ask anyone who knows me. I mean